Chapter 7. The Press Conference. The familiar setting of the St. Thomas Aquinas Gymnasium had never seen a day like this. The atmosphere was even livelier than it was when the place was filled with rowdy seventh graders tormenting their wet behind-the-ears Italian gym teacher, who was now suddenly famous. Cameras rolled and lights flashed for the press conference of the upcoming championship wrestling match. The main players, sitting across a long table, included Joey, Scally, and Salvatore Morelli on one end, and Erica Martin, Chris Jericho, and Stephen Brown on the other. Jericho looked particularly British, with his stylish red coat over a white ruffled shirt. His flowing blonde hair gave him the appearance of a majestic David Coverdale, the lead singer of hard rock's Whitesnake, who achieved worldwide acclaim with their Here I Go Again video in 1987. The buzzing press hadn't even heard his accent yet, and the champ's radical new persona was already an overload of information for them. After all, they were also dealing with the shocking surprise of a completely unknown challenger. "Lish, how does it feel to make this announcement at your elementary school alma mater?" an ESPN reporter asked, launching the event into action. "It feels great," Joey answered, grinning ear to ear. He hadn't been this excited since he stepped into his first wrestling singlet and added the red boa. "Hey, it's my alma mater too," Scally chirped, never one to be ignored. "Who are you again?" ESPN asked, turning toward the blonde menace. Joey patted his little friend a little too hard on the back. "This is Scally, my lifelong manager. And this is the only school I ever graduated from," Scally added, sticking his chest out with pride.
"Oh, poor darling,"
Jericho said, dripping with condescension, although there was a hint of pity in his eyes. Now ESPN was really confused. Who were these people? "Are you okay, Chris? It sounds like you have a cold."
"I'm as healthy as an ox, my boy. And that's Christoph to you and all."
Uncertain if the champ's British accent was actually British or a combination of British and Jamaican, ESPN froze and failed to vocalize a follow-up. Pix 11 saw their opportunity to jump in. "Joey, we understand that you're also a gym teacher here," the eager reporter asked. "Any plans on whether or not you'll be keeping your job?" "Well, Scally and I will be on hiatus while we train for the belt. After that," it took Joey a nanosecond to reevaluate the meaning of the word hiatus. "Yeah, we're definitely quitting." "Title match, baby!" his manager shouted, pumping a fist. Scally hadn't gotten this much attention since the King's Courier wrote about his fall from a department store window back in 1985. He couldn't remember which department store or why he was even there, but somehow he landed on his feet and of course didn't spill a drop of his beer. This got Joey even more excited, and the two native Brooklynites gave each other a high five, sitting in the audience behind the press. Mrs. Casada and Father Randazzo exchanged a concerned look over that unwelcome bit of news. Finally, Morelli cleared his throat to bring the attention around to his league, and to himself. "The important thing is Joeylicious has the full support of Brawl, and will be granted 24/7 access to our training facilities." Scally scowled at the intruding president. "Oh, so now he has your support. Who said you could even be up here?" Joey gave his best friend a firm elbow under the table. "Ow," Scally muttered, holding his side. "Ron Clifford, New York 1, another reporter announced. "Chris, what are your feelings?" "Christoph," Brown interrupted, immediately correcting the reporter's transgression. New York 1 waved away the manager as if he were a gnat at a picnic. "What are your feelings on the upcoming match, champ?" Jericho didn't appreciate the reporter's lack of respect. He wanted his new persona honored, and he wanted it honored with bells on.
"If you don't mind, may I get a query from a proper channel?"
he asked the rest of the room, ignoring New York 1. Fox 5 News immediately stood up, and Jericho acknowledged the station's identification logo on the reporter's gear.
"Close enough. Ask away."
Fox 5 gave an appreciative nod. "Assuming you guys will be following the Rocky playbook all the way through, should we expect a close yet controversial victory for you over Joeylicious?" The eccentric wrestler smirked.
"I wouldn't say that's fait accompli."
His eyes went to Joey.
"Even the blind squirrel finds the acorn once in a while."
"Who you callin' blind?" Scally bristled. "Lish doesn't even wear glasses." Brown leaned over to his client. "I think you mean the acorn finds the blind squirrel."
"Yes, of course,"
Jericho replied. He had no idea what his manager spoke of, and cared even less. Last question, please, Erica finally spoke up. Our champion has tickets to the opera tonight. Jericho's eyes sparkled.
La Bohème at the Met. I hear it's pure ecstasy.
And I'm sure our challenger would like to get started with his training, the pro wrestling executive added. Joey nodded in agreement. A member of the Pro Wrestling Network stood up to be recognized. Lish, could you tell us anything about your training methods? I'll let Scally handle that one, the Italian Dream answered. Seating the floor. Pro Wrestling turned to the suspect wrestling manager. Mr. Scally? It's just Scally, said Scally. Is that your first or last name? The imp frowned. Both as far as you're concerned. Will the two of you be pounding any meat? CNN spit out, relieved to sneak in a question before the closing bell. The other reporters chuckled at the unfortunate choice of words. Joey leaned forward with a scowl. Hey, a little respect, huh? There's a priest in attendance, not to mention my mother. He then gestured toward them. Not thrilled at being pointed out, Mrs. Casada and Father Randazzo both smiled awkwardly at the recognition. And for the record, we don't disclose our training tactics, Scally added, concluding the conference on his managerial terms. The press just shrugged and walked off, uncertain to what they just witnessed. Some of them even wondered why they were asked to show up in the first place. Chapter 8. The Chicken That Got Away. An intense Scally stood in the Casada living room directly in front of the TV. The lights were out, but he was backlit by one of Jericho's old wrestling matches playing on the screen. Joey sat on the couch bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, as if his manager was sharing the secret to eternal life. The lifelong pals barely had a moment to breathe since they were thrust into the spotlight. They hadn't been this popular since their heyday in the mid to late 80s. They may have been even more popular now. Already. Was that even possible? They were kings amongst boys in elementary school, and their legendary tales of triumph and destruction were still whispered of today. Whether it was battling with the evil Sister Marie, blackmailing their English teacher Mr. Duffy to avoid summer school, actually that was just Scally, or blowing up a toilet in the girls' bathroom, again just Scally. They had made a mark that could never be erased or repaired, but there was no time to dwell on such matters. There was a title match to prepare for, baby. But first you gotta get speed, Scally began. Demon speed. Speed's what we need. We need greasy, fast speed. Joey was suddenly less interested. Scal, why are you quoting Mick from Rocky? This is a wrestling match. Oh, sorry. Guess I got carried away. The excitement from earlier in the day began to wear off as the blonde firecracker flopped down next to his pal.
Yeah, forget about that speed crap.
An unseen masculine voice spouted from somewhere in the room. Joey's expression was one of immediate recognition, even more so when he turned to find the notorious wrestling legend Jake the Snake Roberts suddenly standing in front of the TV. He wore his pet python Damien around his neck.
Come fight day. Just make sure you're the badass like me.
Jake continued with nitro flowing through his veins. Snake, I'm no good at playing the heel, Joey countered.
There's nothing good about it. That's the point.
My Catholic upbringing makes it impossible for me to tarnish my soul, the modest Italian reasoned. At least on purpose. Of course, Scally was already looking around for who or what Joey was talking to. Wait, is someone here with us? Jake the Snake, his friend with the special condition announced casually. Even though the impish genius knew that no one else was actually present, he still couldn't help but get excited. Where? Is Damien with him? Around his neck, Joey said. Jake gave Scally a scathing look. Even in Joey's imagination, his evil heroes didn't like being interrupted.
Get him out of here.
They're right in front of us, Joey elaborated to his manager. Jake wants you to leave. On the TV? Scally asked. In front of the TV where you just were. Scally got off the couch and pointed as he walked toward Jake. Here?
He touches me or Damien, you die.
Jake warned Joey. The Italian Dream held out a desperate hand toward his friend. Don't touch him, Scally froze. Or Damien, Joey added. He'll kill me if you do. Why wouldn't he kill me? Scally was one-half fascinated and two-thirds baffled by the current situation. Because it doesn't work that way. You can't see him. That makes sense, Scally conceded. Lish, I'm not going to ask again, Jake shouted, losing his patience. Scally, just go to my room or something, Joey pleaded. I'll call you when he leaves. How are you still seeing imaginary wrestlers? His manager asked incredulously. We just spent the day with a real one. The champ. I don't know, all right? This could really get confusing for you, Scally warned. Tell me about it. Joey shuddered at the thought. If the legends in his head ever bled into real-life scenarios with actual legends that actually bled, he wouldn't know which end was sideways and neither would they. Finally fed up, Jake tossed his snake at the middle-aged wrestling upstart. Joey caught Damien and stumbled backward over the couch in horror, taking a lamp down with him as well. Scally shook his head. Or painful. Responding to the raucous, Mrs. Casada stormed into the room, her nightgown swaying with each angry step. "What's with all the racket?" She threw on a light switch. "It's after midnight." She looked down and saw her son wrestling with a lamp cord, the broken lamp moving at the other end of it. Of course, Damien the Python and Jake, the Snake Roberts for that matter, were nowhere to be seen. "I'm just getting Joey ready for Jericho's finisher, Mrs. C," Scally said, quickly covering for his newly dubbed celebrity client. She pointed the human homewrecker toward the door. "Leave." Finally realizing what was going on around him, Joey snapped out of his latest imaginary episode. His mother pointed him toward his room. "And you get to bed." He scrambled off the floor. "Ma, we need to rethink this Scally living situation. There's nothing to rethink. I've exhausted enough of my thoughts on the matter already." "I'm training for the championship," Joey bemoaned. "The real one. I need him by my side." "He was warned about his drinking," his mother reminded him. "Can't we just go back to the original rule, Mrs. C?" Scally asked. "Me not drinking in here? I think I did halfway okay with that one." But he was doing all the way terrible with this suggestion. Mrs. Casada simply glared at him. "Baby steps, Ma. Come on," her son said, reading her anger. She gritted her teeth. "God help me if I find even a single drop in this apartment." A grin spread across the outdoor drunk's face. "Scout's honor, I swear. You were thrown out of the Boy Scouts." Unwilling to engage with either man-child any longer, Mrs. Casada headed back to sleep. "That was on a technicality, Mrs. C," Scally called out in his defense. "They never proved I burned down that campsite." "Thanks, Ma," Joey called out more appreciatively, his voice echoing down the hall. Only the sound of her bedroom door slamming met his gratitude. The schoolyard of PS 207 had been a major teenage hangout spot for Joey and friends, and many 40-ounce bottles of beer were smashed here once emptied. Before you were old enough to sneak into a bar with fake ID, this was where you drank. And Scally, of course, was no exception. He crawled home from the concrete playground so many nights, it was a wonder he still had skin on his knees. Currently, Joey stood in a fenced-in area with his arms folded across his chest. His so-called manager had come up with stolen a training method from Rocky II, but he wasn't exactly buying into it. Wearing his comfortable but dated Adidas workout sweats, he watched feathers fly as Scally tried to wrangle a live chicken out of a steel cage. "Are we really going to do this?" he asked. "When I say go," Scally responded. "You mean when you release the chicken?" "No. I'm going to say go, then release the chicken." "I can't catch the chicken until you release it," Joey explained. But did he really need to explain that? Of course he did. "Who's the manager here?" Scally shot back. "I say you do. Where did you even get it?" The blonde bird brain was too preoccupied with trying to keep the creature under control. "Get what?" "The chicken," Joey shouted. "Mr. Wang's, the best chicken and broccoli in Brooklyn." "I know. We've eaten there 1,000 times," Joey conceded. "Am I catching the broccoli next?" "Don't get smart," his manager scolded. "Mr. Wang just sold you a live chicken." It was as if the genesis of the feathered beast was more important than whether or not it would actually help Joey to train for the title. "And he threw in the cage on the arm." "Go!" Scally suddenly shouted. The chicken squawked in his hands, clearly upset with the foul treatment. Joey had seen Rocky many more times than the wannabe Mick, so he just waited patiently for the bird to be released. Once the chicken was finally on the ground, it made a beeline for the large opening in the surrounding fence and escaped. Joey never even made a move or broke a sweat. "In the film, I'm pretty sure Mick released the chicken in an enclosed space," he pointed out. "You didn't even go after it," his manager protested. "This was a stupid idea anyway. It's not like I'll be chasing Jericho around the ring." "Right. He'll be chasing you." "So you're saying I'm the chicken?" Joey asked incredulously. "Why are you training me to catch myself?" Scally just stood there for a moment, unsure how to answer that. "Let's just go to the gym," he finally said, completely flustered. Chapter 9. Brawl finds its hero. The Brawl workout facility may not have been state-of-the-art, but it was definitely a step up from chasing chickens. There was a ring in the center, and exercise machines and weights were scattered about. Currently, Milkshake and Tiny tangled with each other in the ring, Shamrock was off to the side bench pressing, and Lou was mopping the floor. Business as usual, but still with a general buzz in the air. No, it was much more than that. This was huge for the struggling underground wrestling league. One of their own was about to get his shot at the title. The real title. Even if the Italian Dream wouldn't be around to wrestle on Saturday nights anymore, ticket sales would surely skyrocket. A whole new generation of untalented wrestlers might even be inspired to flock to grammar school gyms throughout the borough. This would be the golden age of Brooklyn's really awesome wrestling league, and it was about time it had gotten its due. As if to hammer the point home, the front door suddenly swung open, and all heads turned to Joey and Scally entering like conquering heroes. "Licious," Milkshake called out, dropping his guard in front of Tiny. The gentle mountain of flesh waved. "Hey, Joe." "Slam him, Milkshake," Joey shouted back playfully. "Just once, for me. And if you do, I promise to represent you," Scally added, sweetening the pot, at least in his mind. The lanky African-American shook his head. "I wouldn't give you 15% with a gun to my head. I wouldn't represent you with a gun to mine," the scrawny Irishman shot back. "You just offered to represent him," Joey pointed out. The manager with the cheese grater liver waved that bit of logic away. Semantics. Lou peeked up from the wet spot he was working on as if it was just another day at the office. "So the king and his jester grace us with their presence." Shamrock abruptly slammed down his weight bar and stormed off. Joey watched the Irish Adonis go. "What's up with Morelli's golden boy?" Before anyone could answer, Morelli entered the facility with his 8-year-old son and a camera crew in tow. He was facing the crew as he entered. "Did anyone see that chicken? Scared the hell out of—" He suddenly noticed Joey. Hey, is the challenger for the most prestigious title in our industry suddenly in our midst?" "Looks like he's found a new golden boy," Lou muttered under his breath. Joey nodded to the president of Brawl's entourage. "What's with the camera?" "It's for the Brawl documentary," Morelli shamelessly explained. "The new improved Joeylicious is just the push we've been waiting for." Scally rolled his eyes. "You're such an ass-kisser, Morelli." Joey smacked his out-of-line manager in the chest. "Watch it! The kid's here!" Morelli had too many exploitative tactics on his mind to let Scally break his stride. "Joe, I just got off the phone with Erica Martin," he began. "She wants to televise another fight before the title match, just to give the fans a taste of what they're in for with you. We decided to have it at our best high school venue against the Brawl champ." The pro wrestling title challenger wrinkled his forehead in confusion. "Shamrock?" "Shamrock's not the upper division champ," Morelli explained. "He just had his first match there." "Wait a minute," Scally butted in. "How come I wasn't notified of this?" "I believe you're being notified now," Lou chimed in, wringing his mop. Morelli held out his hands with a sleazy grin on his face. "So what do you say, Lish? Exciting stuff, huh?" Joey looked at his fellow Italian closely, the same fellow Italian who, before this, never believed in him or gave him a shot, not even once. "Where's Una Granada?" he suddenly asked before looking around. "Anyone see him?" Milkshake nodded toward the back. "He's in the locker room." Joey headed there immediately, never responding to his fellow Italian. "Lish?" Morelli called out in confusion. "He's thinking about it," Scally shouted, putting the opportunistic president in his place. Una Granada hung up an old grenade in his locker, and the visual seemed to sum up the entirety of his once promising career. He had been a committed Brawl combatant since the league's genesis, so he had seen it all, the ups, the downs, the mediums, the downs. Nothing was left for the imagination when it came to him and underground wrestling. So when his longtime wrestling companion entered the back room, Una Granada wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary. To him, the ordinary encompassed all. "Have you ever pulled the pin on that thing?" Joey asked in good fun. "Not in 20 years, the Puerto Rican, who is sometimes confused for a Mexican, responded. "It's a good deterrent, though." He wasn't kidding. It was one thing to hit a guy with a folding chair in the ring, but a live grenade could really leave a mark, or marks. "Right. When things go south in the ring, you grab the grenade and it usually stops them from hitting me." "How do you know it won't accidentally go off someday?" Joey asked with total sincerity. He was amazed that he hadn't wondered this before. "It's a dud," Una Granada explained. "My grandfather found it in World War II. The Italian dream reflected. Not on World War II, of course. What did he know or care about that? We started to wrestle around the same time, didn't we? I was even before you, bro." Una Granada flashed a sad smile that he quickly erased. Joey nodded. That's right, you were a Brawl original, unfortunately. And back came that sad smile. How would you like to fight me at a high school venue in front of a live televised audience? Joey suddenly asked, dropping a grenade of his own. Una Granada was flabbergasted. Did he hear that right? When it was obvious that he did, he smiled at his old friend. A happy one. I'd love to. Done, Joey simply said. Back in the workout area of the facility, with the rest of the Brawl contingent, minus Shamrock, gathered around, Joey and Una Granada stood before Morelli, his son, and the camera crew. They had obviously just heard the surprising news. Why him? The bewildered president asked, nodding toward Una Granada. I just offered you a title match. Joey folded his arms. Because that's the way it's gotta be. Morelli thought on his Italian star's demand for a second. Literally. All right, if that's the way it's gotta be, he said, caving like a little bitch. Una Granada smacked Joey on the back in appreciation. I'll drop the paperwork, Morelli continued. You do that, Scally added. Reveling in his former bleacher combatant's lack of backbone, Morelli and his crew turned to leave. One more thing, Joey said, stopping the man from getting away so easily. Morelli immediately sensed that he wasn't going to like this. Everyone in the lower elementary school division, Joey began, pausing for dramatic effect. Droplets of sweat pooled on Morelli's forehead. Yeah? Graduates to the upper high school won, Joey concluded with a smile. The president looked around at his band of Brawl misfits in horror. Everyone? The misfits held their collective breath in anticipation. The tension in the air was thicker than a pastrami sandwich at the renowned Katz's Deli in Manhattan. Joey nodded. That includes Lou. Of course, Lou was indifferent to the matter as he continued to mop the floor. Was he putting on a second coat of soap? Or what? Morelli, now fully regretting his decision to crash the party, turned to the cameraman. Turn that off. The camera lowered, and the Italian sleaze turned back to the Italian dream. Even tiny? Even tiny, Joey said. With nothing to bargain with, Morelli's one condition to accept all terms was more like an ask, and you'll throw in an autograph for my kid? Joey looked to the 8-year-old brimming with excitement, and couldn't help but think of his own childhood. He and Scally were already egging houses by that age. And not just on Halloween. Why not? The lame duck president paused for no other reason than his own pride. Everyone knew he was taking the deal. Why not indeed? The two chief negotiators shook on it, and the newly promoted Brawl contingent erupted into cheers, all except Lou. He just sighed and continued to wear out that mop. Chapter 10. Jake the Snake, Movie Critic. Joey sat on a bench overlooking the Verrazano Bridge, the same bench John Travolta sat on when he played Tony Manero in 1977's Saturday Night Fever. And much like Tony in that iconic screen moment, Joey considered the endless possibilities that now lied ahead for him. It was a moment of deep reflection, yes, but also of peace and tranquility. At least it should have been. Somehow, his once-in-a-lifetime opportunity still didn't seem real. He had imagined so many legendary wrestlers over the years. Could he have imagined all this? Maybe his condition was worsening, and the last few days had also just been a dream. What would it mean if he could imagine a full cluster of days at a time? It would be straitjacket time, that's what it would mean. He thought of every moment that had happened since Jericho called him with that Benny Hill accent. Wait, that was it, Benny Hill. It really was all in his head. Nah, too weird. And suddenly peace and tranquility crept back into his psyche. That is until Jake the Snake Roberts appeared next to him. Again. Oh hey, Jake the Snake, Joey welcomed the intruder with little enthusiasm. The infamous wrestling legend thrusted the open palm of his hand in front of the Italian benchwarmer's face.
What do you see in that reflection?
He demanded. Jake, that's your hand, not a mirror, the reluctant participant responded, stating the obvious.
Can't we just pretend it's a mirror for now?
Jake insisted. Joey sighed, knowing there was no quick way out of this. Okay, I see lines, lots of lines, and a little bit of chafing. Jake quick jabbed the lesser wrestler in the face and laughed devilishly, clearly enjoying that. Joey shook off the blow angrily. What brings you around anyway? He shouted. AEW's not in town, and where's your snake? That last question was asked with more relief than anger. At least he wouldn't have to deal with that frightening creature today.
Damien's home enjoying his lunch.
Let me guess, Miceroni. You ever think of adding greens to that poor thing's diet? Constipation is a curse even to a snake. Dr. Casada knew a thing or two about reptile nutrition. How? It was anyone's guess.
Would you stop acting like such a sissy, you pansy?
Jake spat, apparently behind on the times.
I'll worry about my own snakes eating habits.
Jake, I don't think you can use words like sissy and pansy anymore, Joey scolded, especially in the same sentence. It's not culturally acceptable.
What if I shoved your head up your ass? Would that be culturally acceptable?
As long as it was consensual. #MeToo, Jake. The ethically challenged legend was beside himself.
I'm trying to teach you to act like a heel,
He pleaded.
Stop talking like that.
We've already been over this, the walking public service announcer reminded him. I'm the good guy. Plus, I'm way too handsome. The fans will never buy it.
We can add some cigarette burns and a few scars, and that'll take care of that.
I'm like the Tony Manero of wrestling. I always gotta look good. Jake smacked Joey upside the head in the same fashion his mother always did. Hey, watch the hair, Joey screeched. You know, I work on my hair a long time. And you hit it. He hits my hair. A tear almost rolled down his cheek.
That's it. Enough of that Saturday Night Fever crap.
Jake threatened further. But while they were on the subject of cinema...
You know, Staying Alive, that was a far superior flick.
Joey leapt up from the bench in protest. Whoa, what are you, some kind of nut? Staying Alive is the worst sequel ever.
Oh, yeah? What about Grease 2?
Okay, you got me there.
At least Travolta was ripped in Staying Alive.
The wrestling snake charmer added, accentuating the positives. He danced around in a leopard skin mankini, the amateur movie critic from Brooklyn mocked. Those were fighting words, and Jake stood as well.
Sly Stallone directed that,
he reminded Joey with a warning.
And he placed a cameo so beautifully a surgeon couldn't have done it. Oh my God. Remember when they walked past each other?
Yeah, that was pretty sweet, Joey suddenly glowed, rethinking matters. Plus, it had Far From Over by Frank Stallone in it. God, I love that song. I tear up every time right before the chorus.
You see, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Even when you're mad, you turn into a cream puff.
Jake, I can't help it. It's my nature. I'm a lover, not a fighter.
Then you need to get a new nature.
Jake shot back.
Don't you have anything in you that can show a little bit of the dark side?
I get a sick tan in the summer, the wannabe George Hamilton spouted proudly.
That's not what I'm talking about when I say dark. You're a greasy Italian, right?
The question was only offensive to Joey in the sense that he believed the answer to be obvious. Of course I'm Italian. He stretched his arms out toward the bridge. Look where we're standing. Did you know they buried a guy in the cement at that bridge?
I'd like to stick your head in cement.
Jake racked his brain for another angle into the lesser brain of the two.
How about you throw a flaming hot pizza at Jericho when he's not looking?
The devious wrestler finally suggested.
You could be vicious and delicious for real this time.
The tactic was something the Italian dream thought warranted consideration. The whole pie or just a slice? He asked sincerely. 'Cause a whole pie goes for $19.50 at Lenny and John's. That's like half my weekly wrestling wages. Also, did the pizza really have to be that hot? Or could the pie or slice, depending on which one he ended up throwing, just be lukewarm? That would be messy enough, wouldn't it? Fortunately, Joey kept these last few questions to himself.
Do you realize there's a clause in Jericho's contract that says he can't be the heel?
Jake reminded him.
One of you has to bring the nitro. Otherwise, you'll put the audience to sleep.
Joey gave that serious thought as well. It sure was a good thing he came to this bench to think. A sinister grin curled up on the bad boy of wrestling's face.
Don't you remember when I let that King Cobra chomp on the Macho Man's arm?
The Italian daydream nodded enthusiastically.
Remember that?
Jake reiterated, mimicking the Macho Man Randy Savage's voice and gesturing.
Or when Damien and I went after that big son of a bitchin' giant?
I think that was all Damien, Jake, Joey argued. Andre would have twisted you into a pretzel. You were pretty skinny back then. Not appreciating the dig, the cool-blooded heel suddenly floored Joey with a devastating clothesline.
Take that, you Nancy boy,
he shouted in delight. I don't think Nancy boy is an acceptable term these days either, the unwise pupil reminded his evil mentor as he struggled back to his feet. Class still in session, Jake grabbed Joey and viciously executed his signature DDT on him.
Sweet dreams. Fruitcake.
He then said before vanishing. Joey lifted his head weakly as he felt himself slipping into unconsciousness. Still no good. Seek therapy. And with that, he passed out, just as he almost always did when he conjured up one of his legendary friends. The runaway chicken that escaped from the schoolyard suddenly moseyed on over. It pecked at one of Joey's fingers, hoping that it was a worm or something. Unfortunately, it wasn't, and the fowl quickly scampered away. Chapter 11. Don't mess with the champ's begonias. Chris Jericho's greenhouse was a botanic and floral sanctuary with rows and rows of plants and flowers receiving just the right amount of light to blossom. Only the begonias looked a bit wilted, so the champ was currently giving them his motherly love and affection. He had recently plucked the flowering plants from the tropics of South America after receiving a tip from the actor Richard Mole, better known as Bull from NBC's Night Court. He had originally met Richard on the sidelines of a recreational squash match in New Haven, Connecticut, and the two became fast friends, swapping tales of nature's wonders ever since. But as much as that cherished relationship brought Jericho warmth, the state of the begonias still left him with a chill. He was about to put his state-of-the-art spray bottle to use when Stephen Brown knocked on the outside glass. Annoyed by the disturbance, the champ still waved his manager in. "Sorry, champ," Brown said after popping his head in.
Well, shut the door at least, my boy,
Jericho insisted with his so-called British accent. "You can drop the accent, or I'm the only one here." Jericho shot his manager a bemused look as if to say,
"What accent?"
Realizing his client had gone full method, Brown simply closed the door and stepped all the way in. "What are you working on?"
"My begonias. I need to moisten them before I can properly add peat."
Brown leaned in to get a better look. "Oh, nice."
"Stephen, is it daytime or nighttime?"
Jericho asked. "Nighttime."
"Then why are you blocking my fuchsias from the fluorescence?"
Brown turned, ducked, and stepped aside once he realized what his eccentric star wrestler meant. The champ's patience was already at its end whether his fuchsias were out of danger or not.
"What is it you want from me?"
"Joeylicious has a match coming up," his manager announced.
"I heard."
"It'll be good for us to see him in action, no?"
"It's at a secondary school,"
Jericho reminded him, as if that should have said it all. Brown's eyebrows arched in confusion.
"I believe you Americans refer to it as high school,"
the champ explained. "Oh, yeah, I know." At that moment, Brown would have done anything for the exorcism of his client's new persona.
"And you just dragged me to a primary school for—"
Jericho stopped, realizing his manager wouldn't get that reference either.
"An elementary school for a press conference,"
he said instead, editing his sentence on the fly. Brown still didn't fully get what he was going on about. "So?"
"So what's next? A parent-teacher meeting at a nursery?"
Jericho asked incredulously. "Or you mean kindergarten?" The champ just eyeballed his manager. "It's in your contract to attend," Brown continued, moving on as quickly as he could.
"And whose fault is that?"
Jericho shouted, finally fed up with the whole exercise. "We'll be shooting a promo there," his manager shot back, reiterating that the champ had no choice in the matter. Jericho sighed, accepting his defeat.
Fine. Joeylicious high school venue. I'm there with bells on. Now be gone from my begonias. You're messing with their feng shui."
Brown wiped the sweat from his forehead. "I don't know how you deal with this heat." And at that, he left. With that unfortunate bit of business over with, Jericho refocused on his struggling begonias.
"Don't worry, my children,"
he said with a coo.
"The scary man has left us."
Joey looked up at the sign to Lenny and John's Pizza. Nobody knew or cared who Lenny or John was, or if they had ever even existed, and it was hardly the place Brooklynites came to for the atmosphere, but the pizza. Rice balls and Italian heroes were unbeatable, especially after midnight. For some reason, everything seemed to taste even better then. Tipsy Flatbush Avenue bar hoppers would storm the place like the Allied forces stormed Omaha Beach on D-Day. On some nights, the real drunk patrons would even fall asleep at the front counter with a slice hanging out of their mouth. Deciding he had stopped at just the right spot after his end-of-the-day workout, even if it wasn't near midnight yet, Joey stepped into the neighborhood landmark. Danny, the owner's son, was busy prepping the next pie, but looked up as soon as he heard the bell ring on the door signaling an incoming customer. A huge grin spread across his already friendly face. There he is, the man of the hour, the tower of power, too sweet to be sour. He was stumped. What's the rest again? The Italian dream, Joey said, helping the young man along. Joeylicious. The pizza aficionado tossed a handful of flour into the air, which rained down like confetti on a few unwitting customers. No one seemed to mind. Not bad, Danny, not bad. You got a chicken parm hero back there? A proper introduction was fine, but Joey was all business when it came to his scrumptious fuel. Danny took a look behind the counter. Already made, to stay or go. Don't even heat it, the neighborhood celebrity politely insisted. I'll eat it right here. Starving. A true Italian could only last mere seconds in this place without taking a bite out of something. The owner's son put the lukewarm sandwich on a paper plate and slid it over. Do you have a poster for the big match yet? I could put it up in the back. In the back? Joey protested. If we put it up front near the menu, customers might think Joeylicious is the name of a new hero or something. Joey's brain was suddenly hit with a lightning bolt. Not always a good thing, by the way. Great idea. You should name one after me. A hero? Danny pondered that for a moment. Okay, how much can you pay us? Joey scoffed at the notion. Pay you? I'd be lending my celebrity to help bring up sales. You should pay me. Oh, we don't have a budget for that. Lenny and Johns raked in the dough literally and figuratively. So Danny may have been holding out here. Joey could only shake his head as the shrewd pizza man turned his attention to the next paying customer. Water under the bridge, he brought the chicken parmesan hero up to his mouth, but froze before eating it. He sensed someone or something watching him, and looked toward the door. Standing on the other side of the thick glass was the runaway chicken, again. It stared right into Joey's eyes as if accusing him of an upcoming crime. Joey looked at his chicken parmesan, then back at the runaway chicken. Did the fleet-footed fowl believe he was about to devour a close relative? The hungry wrestler shrugged guilt-free and bit into his hero just the same. Una Granada carefully entered his grandfather's bedroom. The feeble World War II veteran was either sound asleep, dead, or a combination of the two. At 100 years of age, who could tell, really? This man had collected enough in Social Security to put most families on easy street, but the old man obviously lived a hero's life, with medals of uncommon valor and captured enemy weapons covering the surrounding walls. He had actually been credited with 14 kills during the war, and that was just with his bare hands. The real damage he did with guns, knives, and heavy weaponry was anyone's guess. One of his commanding officers even nicknamed him the Puerto Rican Punisher. His grandson that was currently standing over him tried to adopt the catchy handle for the ring, but his pathetic military career paled in comparison. Because of this shortcoming, he was denied, coldly. "Grandpa, are you alive?" Una Granada asked quietly. There was no response. The crafty Puerto Rican was about to look for a small mirror to check for breathing condensation, but decided against it. "I know you've been like this for a while now, but make a sound if you can hear me, okay?" His grandfather groaned. Barely. Una Granada was both relieved and concerned. "That doesn't sound good. I better make this quick." Carefully, he sat on the edge of the bed and took the frail man's even frailer hand into his. "I can never be the hero you are, Grandpa," he began earnestly. "My drill sergeant was gunning for me, so I flunked basic training. What can you do? But I'd still like to make you proud." With his free hand, and with a sudden burst of energy, the feisty old-timer smacked his grandson in the face. Una Granada was justifiably shocked. "Wow! That bad, huh? And who's going to give you your bath this week?" Another pained groan let him know that his grandfather was fully conscious and listening. "That's what I thought," the failed military legacy muttered. "Anyway, I got a big match coming up this week," he said, moving on to greener pastures. "First time on TV. Just figured you'd like to know." The World War II vet tried to speak this time, but his words were unintelligible. Una Granada leaned in to hear him better. "What is it? You want to say something?" His grandfather continued to struggle. "Can you write it down?" Una Granada pleaded. "I'll get a pen." He stood up, but the older-than-old man squeezed his hand, indicating that he should stay. Una Granada quickly sat back down. "Say it," he shouted in encouragement. "I know you can." But his grandfather simply smacked him in the face again. Una Granada jumped back up in anger. "That's it, man. And you're going to cut your own toenails too. And those gnarly appendages look like a science project gone wrong, so that was no idle threat." The Puerto Rican wrestler turned out the light and stormed off, leaving his grandfather alone in the dark. Old-timer groaned one last time in disappointment. Sweet death couldn't come fast enough. Chapter 12. From One King to Another. Xaverian was a private Catholic high school located in Bay Ridge, a residential neighborhood in the southwest corner of Brooklyn, and the grossly underrated yet overachieving Scott Baio was one of its proud alumni. He graduated a few years before starring in the Happy Days spin-off Joni Loves Chachi, and life was never the same for him after that. Well, how could it have been? Did you ever hear that opening theme song? Joey, conversely, never had the grades for Xaverian, and his mother couldn't afford the outlandish tuition even if he did. On top of that, the free-spirited Brooklynite would never adhere to the school's strict dress code and cut his luxurious locks. But now, the shoe was on the other hand. Outside Xaverian, a long line of enthusiastic wrestling fans, holding and wearing Joeylicious paraphernalia, snaked around the block. So whether it was Scott Baio or Chachi or even Charles in Charge, none of them could hold a candle to the bright flame of the Italian dream. Meanwhile, in one of the school's classrooms, Joeylicious was filming his promo for the upcoming title match with Jericho. This was where a wrestler truly made his mark. Even someone who wasn't all that athletic or physically imposing could become a star, but they had to have a memorable persona and the gift of gab. Addressing the audience, mocking an opponent, selling a storyline, these were all keys to success. Of course, the Italian dream brushed up on these skills throughout his career, but he only filmed one prior promo, and that was for BCAT TV, which was a mere Brooklyn cable access channel. As usual, Lou Rosati and Brawl took a bath on that failed marketing campaign. But this was on a whole other level, super pumped, and standing in front of the classroom's blackboard, dressed like an evil 1950s greaser with his blue jeans t-shirt, black leather jacket, and slicked back oily hair. Joeylicious glared into the camera. And when I'm done with that wannabe Benny Hill, plant-loving pansy, I'll bury him in the ground and see what sprouts from that. It probably won't be much. Maybe an itty-bitty shrub that Jericho can groom with a pair of garden shears at a time of his choosing. Only he won't be able to groom the itty-bitty shrub, because he'll be the itty-bitty shrub. And you can't groom yourself with a pair of garden shears. That's all I have to say about that. Title match, baby. Watch Joeylicious shock the world. The camera pulled back to reveal an equally pumped Scally standing next to the cameraman, and a disinterested Jericho and Brown off to the side. Jericho had added a blue sash littered with medals to his already posh wardrobe, giving him the appearance of British royalty. "Sweet!" Scally cheered. He then held up his hand for a high five, and Joey eagerly returned serve, practically taking off the little man's scrawny arm in the process. Of course, Jericho was less than impressed.
Yes, nice one, Arthur Fonzarelli. Only you're supposed to prune a shrub, not groom it.
"Who you calling the Fonz?" Joey shot back. "I'd have you know that this look is completely inspired by the 1974 film The Lords of Flatbush." "Henry Winkler was in The Lords of Flatbush," Brown said, immediately chiming in at the challenger's expense. "You messed with this man's knowledge of 1970s pop culture at your own peril." Scally gave his rival manager a quizzical look. "Who's Henry Winkler?" His rival frowned. "The Fonz." Joey considered that revelation and was not about to back down. "Okay, so Stallone was in it too, along with that other guy. Scal, what's his name? The guy from Riptide? Perry King," Brown was quick to inform them. Again. This caused Jericho to look off into the distance and reflect on his past in only the way his new persona could.
Perry and I went on a summer jaunt across the Greek islands back in '99. Two kings never enjoyed each other more.
Joey and Scally weren't sure how to deal with the homoerotic nature of that statement, but Joey shook it off quickly enough. "Yeah, so how do you know I'm not Perry King?" "Well, he would know that," the champ's clever manager pointed out. "He just said he spent a summer with him." The out-of-their-league Brooklynites were already being pummeled, and the title match hadn't even started yet. Thankfully, Morelli entered to stop the bleeding. "What a crowd out there tonight! How's it going in here?" Jericho rolled his eyes at the new arrival.
"Peachy,"
he said, dripping with elitist sarcasm.
"Shut the door on your way out."
"Huh?" "Beat it, Morelli," Scally shouted, much more to the point. "Wait!" Brown shoved the flummoxed president of the little wrestling league back out the door. At that, Jericho momentarily turned back into Jericho.
"Step aside, amateur hour,"
he said to Joey, dropping the British accent.
"It's the master's turn."
The out-of-fashion greaser gave his more-than-worthy soon-to-be opponent a confused look. What happened to Benny Hill? The champ elbowed his would-be challenger out of the way and took center stage. As soon as the camera restarted, he was back into character.
My humble servants, or fans, as my American brethren would say, have always viewed me to be a generous gent. Well, this coming wrestling extravaganza, I proved them correct when an unknown gets his shot at immortality. But does Joeylicious show gratitude? No. Humility? Not even a smidgen. A sense of wardrobe? Not on your life? I treated him like a brother.
At this point, he let his emotions apparently get the better of him.
Excuse me.
He choked up and momentarily turned away. Wow, he's good, Scally had to admit. Joey nodded. Yeah. Jericho was seemingly holding in tears now.
I treated him like a brother, and he stabs me in the spine.
He suddenly shouted.
Well, I'm pulling the blade out, Joeylicious. Pulling it out, and coming for you.
He declared, pointing directly at the camera with fire in his eyes. The cameraman lowered his lens and the champ instantly calmed himself, stepping away from the blackboard.
And that's how it's done, son,
he said to Joey, dropping his accent once more. He then patted the Italian Dream firmly on the back and casually headed toward the door. Joey and Scally were in awe as the soon-to-be wrestling legend exited with his manager. Chapter 13. Una Granada Too Many. For the first time in Joey's not-so-illustrious wrestling career, he was part of a sold-out crowd. In fact, he was the main attraction. As if that weren't enough, there was a local broadcast team present, and TV cameras lined the area around the ring. And, on top of that, in the center of the ring, wearing a tuxedo and holding a microphone, was the legendary ring announcer Michael Buffer. Michael Buffer. He had worked almost every major fight since the early 80s, and now he was here at a high school venue, of all places. Were things currently that bad for the classy gent with the mic? Or were they just that good for a certain Italian wrestler from Brooklyn? Of course, the latter was the only acceptable answer. And now, for the main event, Buffer's voice boomed over the crowd.
Let's get ready to rumble!
That was exactly what the audience in Zavarian's 500-seat gymnasium wanted to hear, and they burst into a deafening roar. First up is our challenger, the announcer continued, but then quickly stopped. An authority figure waving at him from outside the ring shouted something his way. Buffer put his hand over the mic. They're both challengers? He listened again. This isn't a title match? Then why am I here? After listening to a final, barely audible comment, the old pro shrugged. He was getting paid either way. Pressing on, he brought the mic back up to his lips. Originally from Puerto Rico, he could blow at any minute. Una Granada! The crowd booed as Una Granada charged into the ring wearing army fatigues. His hand grenade hung from a chain around his neck. Buffer pointed in the opposite direction. And our other challenger. This caused the crowd to cheer uproariously, with a record of 97-0. At the back of the gym, just outside the locker room, Joey, still sporting the Lords of Flatbush look, waited to make his triumphant entrance with Scally. But he was unsure if he heard what he just heard correctly. They wiped out all your losses, Scally shouted with glee. I'm undefeated, Joey shouted even louder. The pair then hugged and hopped around joyfully, as if that actually meant something. The wrestler with the 1950s greaser appearance suddenly backed away, his hand going up to protect his head. Okay, watch the hair. Back in the ring, Buffer continued with his introduction. From Brooklyn, New York. The crowd went into a frenzy at the not-so-subtle shout-out to themselves. The man of the hour. Is that Michael Buffer? Scally asked, squinting toward the ring. The Tower of Power. Joey squinted as well until his eyes widened in recognition. Holy crap. Too sweet to be sour. Joey looked at his manager in shock. And this is the match before the title. The Italian Dream. Scally pumped his fist. Yeah, baby. Joeylicious, Buffer shouted, finally concluding his grand introduction. As the crowd reached a crescendo, with every man, woman, and child in the hometown hero's corner, Joeylicious and Scally took their sweet time soaking it all in. Yes, the Italian Dream's dream had finally come true, and this was the match before the title. But as he stepped through the ropes to finally meet his friendly and familiar opponent, Joeylicious immediately spotted Jake the Snake, and Damien waiting for him at the nearest turnbuckle. Damn, the wannabe Perry King muttered to himself. He looked to his manager and best friend. "Jake the Snake is back!" "Where?" Scally asked, his head darting around like a blind mongoose. "Don't look at him!" Joeylicious shouted in a panic. "I can't help it," the blonde menace explained. Jake the Snake stared his conflicted student down.
Lish, as soon as the bell rings, you go right for that grenade,
he said, demanding more than advising. "Then what?" Joeylicious responded, pleading more than asking.
Pull the pin and let everyone know who's boss.
Scally may not have known what his one and only client was hearing, but he knew it couldn't have been good. "Don't listen to him!" "But it's me talking to me through him," the confused Italian pointed out. Of course, that insane yet sane logic was lost on Scally. "What?" The bell rang, and Joeylicious immediately did his evil mentor's bidding. He locked up with Una Grenada and yanked off the hand grenade from around his neck. The Puerto Rican challenger to the challenger stepped back in shock. "Lish, what are you doing, man?" "No more, Mr. Nice Guy," the devilish greaser shouted. Then he pulled the pin out of the grenade. A hush fell over the crowd. "Are you insane?" Una Grenada screeched. "What? It's a dud," Joeylicious said matter-of-factly. His opponent violently shook his head. "That's what my grandfather said. He was already senile when he gave it to me." Joeylicious's eyes bulged out of his head. Without thinking, he dropped the grenade in the middle of the ring and fled for the ropes. Una Grenada was with him step for step. But boom! It was the shortest match in Brawl history, televised or not. The next morning, Joey and Una Grenada shared the same hospital room with the same injury, each lying face down on their respective beds with their bandaged asses elevated in the air. Neither could remember much about the explosion or the immediate aftermath, but they could certainly feel the pain it caused. It would be weeks before the Italian culprit could even sit comfortably on a toilet again. He would have to hover over the rim like a B-52 bomber dropping number 2s into the porcelain sea. And depending on what his mother cooked that night, the splashdown effect could lead to even more collateral damage. Jake the Snake Roberts would forever live in infamy. Joey looked over at his quickie opponent. "Sorry about that. Are you all right?" "Hanging in there," Una Grenada replied, pun intended. "Did I kill anyone?" the guilt-ridden Italian asked hesitantly. "Scally, Michael Buffer?" His involuntary roommate shook his head as much as he could. "No, other than the ring, I think everyone pulled through. How can you be sure?" "A cop came in to question us while you were sleeping last night. I told him it was an accident." The cop didn't believe a word, but what did he care? He and his fellow officers found the whole episode hilarious, and so did every donut shop in Brooklyn. Una Grenada, you've been wrestling all these years with a live grenade around your neck. Joey closed his eyes and mused. "And I thought I had issues." "Yeah, well, I'll make sure the next one's a fake," the original Brawl member promised. "Sort of. Try a toy, just in case," Joey said, one-upping his wrestling friend. A doctor entered and began looking at their charts. "How are we feeling this morning?" Joey tried to make eye contact with the man of science, but nothing doing. "When can we get out of here, Doc?" "I don't anticipate you staying with us too long," the doctor began hopefully. "But neither of you will be back in the ring for at least a few months." So much for hope. "A few months?" the wrestling contender shouted incredulously. "I'm about to fight for the belt." "Oh, you won't be ready for that," the doctor announced casually, barely looking up from the charts. "What?" Joey cried. "Buzz the nurse if you guys need anything." And at that, the doctor headed back out. "Wait, Doc, my title match?" The doctor didn't so much as look at Joey as he left the room. "Doc," Joey called out in desperation, "let me out of here." He began to flail his arms and legs in a panic and accidentally flipped over until he was hanging completely upside down. "Help!